Hello. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's quite an honor to be speaking at Site Reliability Engineering Conference. My name is Wieczorek, and I work at the United States Digital Service. Specifically, I work on the digital service at the Department of Veterans Affairs, Site Reliability Engineering, and Cloud Modernization Team. My background's in operations, low-level systems, law, and a little bit of front-end engineering in there. So I'm going to talk today about our process and our continued process as we're moving through it of combining the DevOps teams from multiple applications, multiple DevOps teams that came up totally separately, and combining those into one single shared site reliability engineering team that addresses issues and problems with both applications at the same time. Before I forget, I would like to give a shout out to some of my digital service engineers, Dan Kozlowski, Lisa Chung, and Alan Ning, who are fantastic to work with. And a special thanks to Jiten Vaidya, who is a Google and Dropbox SRE who came and joined us for a 3-month tour of duty and really helped us get started with this process. So a little bit about digital service to start. We are a startup in the White House, founded in 2014 under the Obama administration, with the idea of bringing the best product managers, designers, and engineers to Washington to hire and tackle some critical national priorities, including immigration, veterans benefits, and at that time specifically, healthcare.gov. So you can see some of our values on this slide I put up, and those are some values we live by. I'm going to call back to these a little bit later, but I just want to put them up there for your viewing pleasure right now. So when we initially started, we were a little bit worried about getting applications into the digital service process, but we ended up getting hundreds of applications seemingly overnight. So we were able to expand from these initial national priorities to having teams across the government. We have teams in the Defense Digital Service working to make lives easier for service members. We have teams at the Department of Homeland Security who are there to modernize immigration, Health and Human Services working on QPP and Medicare, login.gov giving a single sign-on for citizens to interact with their government, Small Business Administration helping small businesses get started and get certified, and of course where I am, the digital service at the Department of Veterans Affairs, where we're streamlining how veterans interact with digital services. Really, we're citizens and we're coming into the government for short tours of duty to make the government better. So a little bit more about VA. Veterans face a lot of issues when they interact with their government. When they ask for veteran benefits and those benefits are denied or lower than they thought they'd be, a veteran has to file an appeal. That can be a process that takes months, years, and in some cases decades. Veterans also don't have any good single resources for tracking or managing their benefits, and certainly not for finding and discovering what the benefits they may be entitled to. And finally, applying for healthcare online for a veteran is very, very difficult. If you're a veteran and you've applied for healthcare, you've heard of the Form 1010EZ. It's a fillable PDF that only works in Internet Explorer, and it only works about 25% of the time. So we're addressing these issues chiefly with our 2 applications right now. Caseflow, that's working on streamlining the veterans appeals process, making things faster in the background, giving veterans status on what their appeal looks like. On the front end, we have our Vets.gov application, which is a modern React application built on Ruby on Rails, which gives veterans a single portal to track, apply, and discover benefits. And finally, one thing I'm particularly proud of, a functionality we added to Vets.gov was to totally revamp the healthcare process, the healthcare application process. And as of this morning, 327,923 veterans have applied for healthcare through Vets.gov with a very easy, intuitive process, which you can do on your phone. We do that, and we're able to do that, and we're popular because we bring veterans into our office, we work with them online, and we sit and build these applications with them, rather than sitting and building something that we think they might want. So we're able to address problems that they have with applications and applying. So I'm talking today about how we took these DevOps teams from Vets.gov and Caseflow and combined them into a single shared SRE team. So where are we now with that process? A little taste. We have streamlined it greatly. We're well on the way. It is certainly an ongoing process. But we found a lot of efficiency with taking our various DevOps teams, putting them under the site reliability engineering moniker, cross-training people on what other applications are doing. It gives a wider surface area for people to pick up incidents across the stack and across our applications. So I'm hoping that what you'll get from this talk are learn some of the lessons, or hear some of the lessons we've learned, and come back and take it to your organization and maybe make things a little bit more inclusive and more efficient. So what do we do at DSVA? Well, we, as site reliability engineers, focus on removing single points of failure and bottlenecks in the system. You can see a couple stats that I put up there, and you can see more at Vets.gov/scorecard. But right now we're sitting on about 2 minutes of downtime per week, and very, very low application error rate. This is important because, as I mentioned earlier, veterans have a hard time dealing with digital services in the government. And sometimes those applications, if your application is down, can go into a black hole, and the veteran's waiting a year, and they never knew that their application didn't go through. So site reliability engineering is critical in these cases. You might not expect it from government, but we use an all-modern stack at Digital Service, VA. We use Prometheus and Grafana for our monitoring at the infrastructure level. We use Sentry for application level monitoring. Travis, Jenkins for continuous integration, continuous deployment. Vets.gov and the Vets API, which is the backing for Vets.gov, is totally open source. You can find that on GitHub. And we deploy about 40 times a month to production. We deploy about 600 times a month across all environments. So Jiten, the guy I mentioned earlier, said as he was leaving, coming back to the West Coast, and I quote, "You cannot distinguish this team from any well-run DevOps shop in the private industry." So we're doing some good things in government. But we have these two teams that came up differently. Vets.gov came up with a different set of engineers and at a different time than Caseflow. We used different application stacks, different PagerDuty rotations. Basically, everything was different. So that led to an idea. What if we standardized on the same tech stack? We standardized on the same on-call rotations and more. What would you call a team like this? And why would you do something along these lines? Well, this is an SRE team. And the reason you have these is because it makes sense to have a group of people who specialize in these tools, in these processes, and these best practices from across teams and from private industry to keep our applications reliable and highly available, especially when people's lives and people's well-being is at stake. So we can focus on creating a shared SRE team. People from the Vets.gov DevOps team can triage incidents on the appeals Caseflow application and vice versa. You gain a lot of efficiency by moving to one tech stack. So anyone on either side can suddenly triage issues on both sides. And that's really the heart of the SRE team that we are looking to build, and we're in the process of building at the Digital Service of VA. So a couple goals here. One's more internal facing, based on the team that we work with, Vets.gov and Caseflow at Digital Service. That's combining the tech stack and working with the people we control, working with our engineers and our developers to get buy-in for this new process, this new SRE process. And the second goal is to turn around, pivot, and evangelize this process to the broader VA. The VA is really, at its heart, a giant enterprise. And so we're a small team within that gigantic enterprise. And we want to push out, and we want to show people what we can do and how we can do it using leading tools, modern best practices, and show them that they can do the same thing too, despite being stuck in an enterprise, despite having done the same thing over and over for many, many, many years. So the first goal is inward facing, and that involved sitting down and looking at some of the things we were doing and looking at where we could combine our practices. So from a technological perspective, we were all over the map. Now, we were standardized on AWS GovCloud region, but we were using combinations of everything to get our deployments done. We're using Jenkins and Travis and Circle CI and Bash scripts to get things out. We're using Terraform and Ansible for our builds, Prometheus, Sentry, Datadog, and experimenting with Kubernetes here and there. So we were totally different. And so it took a long time to figure out exactly how different we are. This took a lot of planning. But this is the easy part, I think. Pointing at, oh, this team uses Terraform, this team uses Ansible. Why don't we marry those two and use Terraform for the infrastructure and Ansible for the configuration? That's the easy part. The harder part comes when you start listing all the ways that you're actually different. We diverge in a lot of ways, and that list keeps going on and on. We diverge in application services, build deployment services, access controls, build resources. Really, you name it. The list kept going. We're different in just about every way you can think of. But all this right here is the technical side of things. I'm here to talk a little bit more about the cultural side of things. That was the big issue with our first goal, and it's the ongoing issue with our second goal. Getting buy-in from everybody, letting people know that they can speak up, they can ask questions, they can do this new thing, even though they're using new technologies and working in new applications that they're not used to. So first goal, look inward at Vets.gov and Caseflow. Get those together, both on a technical side and on a cultural side. Second goal, socialize these concepts throughout the broader VA organization. And bring VA teams into the SRE organization on rotations to learn about what we're doing. So I mentioned before, the VA is at its heart an enterprise. Our fiscal year 2017 budget was $180 billion. $4 billion of that goes towards IT services. If you correlate budget with revenue, that makes us about the 6th or 7th largest company in the United States. It makes us about the 15th in the entire world. So it's a big organization. And enterprises, as we know, can be a giant pain to deal with. Legacy IT, legacy thinking, legacy teams, application teams that started in the government in 1975 and have been doing exactly the same thing every day, in and out for years and years. And then we come in and we say, no, it's time to change. It's time to use industry-leading best practices. That's an uphill battle, and that's really the hard part of what we're doing, the culture here. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. So how do we get from where we were to where we were going? Well, the first step is to get our SRE team to work on the projects that we have. Combine those teams and switch from we're looking at only DevOps on our particular application to a more forward-looking and outward-looking approach with site reliability engineering. We're going to define a broad set of categories for which the SRE team should be responsible. And for each of those categories, we'll use the best practices available. Those best practices might exist in Vets.gov, they might exist in Caseflow, or they might exist out in private industry. We're lucky because our digital service tour of duty model, we bring people in for short periods of time. They bring us their best practices from places like Google and Facebook, and we learn from them, and we continue to build that site. So we're always up on what's going on in the private industry, and that's really a big indicator for us that we're doing well, because we're always following along with what the best thing is, and which is distinct from the newest thing. We evaluate everything as we move forward. And then finally, figuring out a common on-call strategy. That was when this became a lot more real to me. Previously in our Slack channels, we had a Vets.gov DevOps channel, and we had an Appeals DevOps channel. And those two, on the day we decided to make this official, got torn down and turned into the SRE channel. So that's when it was really real to me, and that's the day I mark the real transition into what we're doing for this inward-looking role here. But then after that, we start pushing out into the broader VA. And this really involves building outward into the VA, packaging those tools, packaging those best practices into the most generic form possible, putting together best practices on monitoring, testing, security, putting together playbooks on moving to cloud service providers, for example. The VA has more than 600 applications that we hope to move from on-premises data centers. We currently have 132 data centers spread throughout the United States into commercial cloud service providers, which are a lot cheaper and a lot more reliable. But like I said, this is a big industry with legacy code and legacy teams who don't have any familiarity with cloud concepts. So we want to package that and bring that out. And we want to design engagement models for that. Does that mean we bring in engineers from the outer VA and train them, or does that mean we go out? It turns out the answer was a little bit of both. So I'm going to talk about a few lessons we learned from this first goal, which was integrating our own internal culture and bootstrapping this SRE team from the DevOps teams and leveraging everyone's skill sets to make the best applications and the most reliable applications that we possibly could. And I think you'll see a common theme here, that what I'm getting at with all these lessons learned is that what you want is a team that works cohesively, and they're not afraid to give ideas or ask questions. They don't feel like they don't belong there. They celebrate each other's victories. And when that happens, everyone, even the quietest voices, will feel free to speak out and say things and give ideas and say, why aren't we doing things this way? Or maybe we could do things this other way. And it'll be evaluated. But without everyone having the confidence to speak out and do that, you lose a lot. You can lose a lot of institutional knowledge especially from these people that come from the best companies in the world. Some of the lessons. Cultivate a culture where it's safe to ask questions. By this I mean it's really range. There's really range in the gamut of questions. So there's the small and innocuous things that some people don't feel comfortable asking. And step one is to get them comfortable with asking those kinds of things. Like, I just had my MacBook re-imaged. Why can't I connect to the jump boxes? Well, you probably just need to SSH add your keys locally. You probably forgot to do that. It's something we always forget. It's something when things get re-imaged, it's a very minor thing, but if you can get over that first hurdle or if you can make your team comfortable with asking small questions like that, then they'll start asking more fundamental questions. Like, why are we doing things in the manner that we're doing them? Why are we using Nginx here and HAProxy there? Why are we exploring the use of Envoy as a proxy? What does that bring to the table? And then you get into the even more fundamental and groundbreaking questions like, why are we deploying in this manner? We should be doing it in a different manner, right? I heard about this other way of doing things. And the answer is usually yes. Or the answer is often yes, I'll say. We're moving, for example, right now, our deployment models to a build, release, deploy model. And what that means is a total separation of the concerns when we do releases. We build it, and then we release it, and then we finally deploy it out into production. So the result of this increasing level of questioning that people should feel comfortable to address is that you may end up having better infrastructure, separating concerns better, doing things more aligned with best practices. Really, you want this culture where when someone writes in Slack, this is a stupid question, but you want people to jump on and say, no, there are no stupid questions. Ask away. Be respectful of differing abilities and skill sets. What I mean by this is that everybody has something to bring to the table. Your background may be in low-level systems. It may be in data structures. It may be in distributed systems. It may be all over the map. But everybody has the ability to come in and add something to it because everyone is an expert in their own domain and an expert in their own field. And so when they can bring those lessons learned from their domains, and when they feel comfortable bringing those lessons learned, you can really learn a lot about your infrastructure and where you're going. Asking someone when they first onboard, hey, how did you do things at this company you just worked at, is a great way to learn current best practices, a great way to get people to tell you what they were doing, and you can evaluate it for yourself and see if it's something that you want to employ in your current environment. Also, just asking people generally what their experience is. Because if we all have different experiences, it's like a bunch of Venn diagrams. You can get a giant pool of shared knowledge from all these people, from all these different skill sets, and you can address things in different ways. One of the hallmarks of site reliability engineering, I think, is that diversity in skill sets and adding to the shared pool of knowledge leads to better systems, better, more reliable systems, and people who feel more comfortable on the team, and they feel more comfortable working with one another. Implement a blameless post-mortem culture. This one's straight from the Google SRE book. So I'm not here to tell you you should be doing post-mortems. You should. And I'm not here to tell you how to write them or when you should do them. You should already be researching that. You should already be implementing that into your team. But what I'd really like to point out is the word blameless. This is very important. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn, as cliche as that might sound. People shouldn't feel afraid to make mistakes. They shouldn't feel like their jobs are on the line when they make a mistake. They shouldn't feel like they're going to catch fire for trying something new or pushing out a little bit or pushing the limits of our software or our tech stack or trying new things. Because if you're not making those kinds of mistakes, then you're probably not pushing yourself and pushing us to the limits of what we can do and what we can become. But blameless, again, is the key word here. When something does go wrong, when someone tries something new and it does go wrong, or when someone just does something wrong in general, you have to remember no one's doing anything malicious here. No one's bad at their job. People are doing the best thing that they can, trying new things, and using the best information available to them at any given time to make these decisions. So it's important that no one gets blamed. I find using the passive voice is very, very helpful here. Saying, oh, there was a problem when all of our something happened, rather than person X did that and point fingers. It makes people feel more comfortable to try new things and to show out more. Celebrate successes, even small ones. This is a quick one, but I think it's good for your teams. When an engineer finishes doing something that's important, when an engineer finishes putting together some new code or a new script, come out and say, hey, great job. Give them these successes. We have a victories channel in Slack, which is great for this, but it doesn't even have to be in the victories channel. You can give them a party parrot in the engineers channel. You can buy them a pie, or you can go play some kickball or something like that. The important thing is that every time we do something, it should be celebrated, because people should feel like they belong, and that makes people more willing to step out and try new things, which is a common theme here. Imposter syndrome is real. My colleague Robbie Holmes talks about this a lot, and I'll just hit on it. We work with some of the best engineers, product designers, and managers in the world, and it's really easy to feel like you don't belong. The number of people that I've worked with that have been very early stage employees or founders of some of the biggest tech companies really is staggering, and it can make anyone feel like they don't belong. My boss, Matt Cutts, was one of the first employees at Google. He's SVP of search and the king of spam at Google. And to work with someone like that, someone that smart and that accomplished, it makes you feel like you don't belong there, like somehow you got through the process illicitly. And so you should remind yourself that you got through the process for a reason. You should remind your teammates that they got through the process for a reason and they have real things to contribute. And imposter, it can really feel like that. I'm feeling like that right now on this stage because I'm talking to SREcon. So a couple lessons learned from goal 2, evangelizing SRE to the larger organization. So I've already talked about how big the VA is and the legacy crumbling infrastructure. We're still writing COBOL. We were just talking about this the other night. I met a 90-year-old developer who wrote COBOL in the 70s, and I told her she could probably work quite well in the VA's infrastructure. So when these teams have been doing the same thing, change is hard and change does not come fast. Luckily, at the digital service, we have some of these values we live by. And these are the ones I posted earlier, kind of calling back to those now. And they're kind of like a cheat sheet for how to affect change and how to do things in a larger organization. And of course, this applies to the smaller organization and the inward-looking goal as well. But they're a really great lens through which we can look and get values from and evaluate what we're doing or what we're going to be doing. Create momentum is one of the big ones. And Vets.gov is really a hallmark of this. It means starting small. Starting small with a small application that you can iterate off of. Vets.gov was the first application at VA in a commercial cloud service provider environment. We started small. We started working with veterans, designing things that they wanted to see, designing things that meant real things to their lives. And people within the VA organization, the larger organization, saw that. And they said, wow, we want to do that. What can we do with the best practices that you're using? What can we do with the tooling and the testing and the monitoring that you're using? And that's fantastic because when you're evangelizing something to a larger organization, that's half the battle, getting people to come to you. My colleague Lisa Chung and I did a DevOps brown bag a couple weeks ago. We brought people in from the larger VA because they were interested based on the work we've already done. And they said, how are you doing this? How are you doing this monitoring? What does your tooling look like? And we hosted for several hours and we showed them, this is how we do things. And you can do things in the same way. We're here to help. So creating this momentum can be monumental in getting your job done when you're evangelizing something to a larger organization, especially an enterprise type organization. Hire and empower great people. So two things here, hiring great people, and probably the more important part is empowering great people. But I'll just say on the hiring point, you have to hire people that are very good at their jobs. We hire some of the best people. The most experienced people, people that know what they're doing. But I'll push back on the thought that you should hire those rock star engineers who take on everything themselves and who know everything and are able to do absolutely everything. And they're the person people reverently come to and say, oh, this person could solve every single problem. We like to hire people that are good working in teams. They share the load with people. They share the burdens of the team. They information share. And they make sure everybody is on board with what's going on. They're not an island. No person is an island on a team. You're all a team, and you all work together. So I'll push back and say that you don't necessarily want those rock star people. You want the people that work collaboratively that are very, very good at their jobs, which is a totally different thing. On to empowering now. I said this was more important, and I believe it. When people see that there's an issue or a problem, or they want to try new things, they should feel empowered. They should feel like there's no bureaucracy there stopping them from trying new things. They should feel like there's no culture there stopping them from trying new things. And managers, if there's any managers in this room, and managers working, protect your employees from the wrath of the executives. We have something at Digital Service we call executive air cover. And that basically means that our bosses are the human shields for us, for things coming from higher up. You don't want to be in an environment where someone makes a mistake and a system goes down and an executive is running around saying, hey, that person needs to be fired. No, those people need to be empowered. When those executives come to you, you need to say, no, that's not how it works here. These people are empowered to do what they think is right with the industry best practices. Find the truth, tell the truth. This is one of my favorites. This means both seeking out the truth, seeking out what's going on in your organization, maybe why something isn't performing up to par, and then being candid about how to fix it or what to do differently in the future. We have a few examples of this recently at VA. We go out into the organization and we sit side by side with engineers. Not the product managers or not the people selling what the engineers are doing, but we sit side by side with the engineers and we learn things. And some recent things we learned, for example, one team insisted that they use source control. So we asked them to see it. They're using a Git-like system, and rather than committing things to the same repo every time, they're creating a new repository every time they made a commit. So there were literally thousands of repositories, each slightly different. We showed them Git, and we showed them how to use Git. Another example, we found a team that insisted they did testing. Please show us how you do testing. They email the new code around to their colleagues, and they said, run this and try to find an error. If you can't find an error, it's going into production. We showed them the joys of automated testing and how one can run thousands of unit tests in a minute. And I think it changed their lives. And finally, a monitoring team that does no monitoring. They wait for a phone call from a user saying, the site's down, I can't access anything, I'm getting 404s. That's not monitoring. So we're candid about how to change these things, candid about how to do monitoring, candid about testing, candid about using source control and how to fix it and how to do it correctly. So last one I'll hit on today, going where the work is. I think we leverage that greatly at the digital service. When we're working with Department of Homeland Security to make things better, modernize immigration and make things better for migrant workers who are trying to come over for seasonal work, we go out into the fields. We send engineers to the field to work with these workers to see how they do things and see how we can design things with the users and with them and finding their roadblocks rather than sitting in our offices in DC and guessing what they might want. When there's a problem in the Middle East that can be solved with engineering, we deploy engineers, and we have deployed engineers out to Afghanistan to work on the forward operating bases. There's a Wired article about this. You can look it up. USDS goes to the Middle East. We sit there and we work. We go where that work is. At the VA, when we need to migrate databases, I told you there's hundreds of applications that want to go to the cloud. We'll fly around the country and we'll sit down with these people and we'll work with them face to face and make things happen. But all these values are up for interpretation. It doesn't mean you have to fly around the country or the world to get things done. You can walk across the street and sit down with the application development team. You can walk upstairs or wherever they happen to be sitting and sit down with them. The point is that you're getting to know them, they're getting to know you, and you can seek out these people that will be evangelists for modernized style, site reliability engineering, and modernized DevOps. So why should you care about this experience? I kind of alluded to it earlier, and I think I outright said it a couple times, but through integrating these two DevOps teams, we're able to find a lot of efficiency. And we're able to spread the burden out on PagerDuty, spread the burden out on writing configuration scripts among more people. So more people have a little bit more time on their hands. And when a site reliability engineer has more time on their hands, they address perceived bottlenecks in the infrastructure. They proactively go out and find places where things can be improved, and make it more reliable. Especially finding these single points of failure. So there's also a lot of money to be saved on your team because you're not using multiple products with multiple licenses and so on and so forth. So you can take, hopefully, some of these lessons to your organization and open up the shared understanding as you move to triaging incidents and triaging things as a giant team rather than as multiple DevOps teams. So with that said, we also need some SREs. There's a lot of work to be done in government. We're hiring. We need very, very good engineers especially because we're modernizing the entire VA, but we're also doing things across the government. It's one thing to say that the government's broken, and it's another thing to go in and fix it. And with a digital service, you're empowered to fix these things. Really, there's no better way to be a good citizen than to go in and change the government under which you're living. So my Twitter and my email are up there. Feel free to shoot me any questions or concerns you might have or comments on this talk. And I have a few minutes left, so I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you.
I have a quick question for you. We do a rotation where I go to different Scrum teams. when I first set that up, I was thinking I would go for 2 weeks, and my manager was like, "No, why don't you go to a different team every day?" What type of schedule do you have set up for your rotation where you bring people in?
Yeah, that is ongoing for sure. We found it a lot easier for us to actually go out into these teams whenever possible. And a lot of times it comes down to firefighting. So if a team is facing a crisis or something along those lines, we'll go out, we'll show them how we do things. We also get requests for us to come out and do things. And we've had varying levels of success. We've invited teams out to sit with us, and we've gotten the answer, no, I'm a cloud architect. I'm not an engineer. I don't need to know this stuff. So there's various degrees of buy-in.
So is it ad hoc or is it?
Ad hoc right now. And we're hoping to, we've engaged a few teams already, and we're hoping to bring them in for, say, a month at a time to work with us. Hmm?
Hi. Hi. I'm interested in if there are opportunities to contribute externally without doing the immersive, like 3-month experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. Mostly we, as I said, go where the work is, but we do have some remote teams. We do have some people that work remotely from various places, so there certainly can be opportunities. Additionally, like I said earlier, all of our code is on GitHub, so you're more than welcome to contribute and address issues. Additionally, our team 18F is our sister agency, and 18F has purely remote teams as well. So they do very similar things to us, but more in a consultative role, I feel like. So you don't necessarily have to move in for long periods of time. You can do things ad hoc in some ways.
So let's give Aaron a round of applause for their talk.